Hi, everyone. Samantha Varner here from ProSymmetry. Today's conversation is with Kenny Sharp. He is a former Tempus admin. He also implemented Tempus in multiple phases in a past life of his. And overall, he really is an expert in project and program management in the telecommunications space, the IT space. You'll see all of that later. But today we really sit down to chat about the different items to take into consideration to have a successful business change. And of course, we're talking about that in the realm of resource management. And we even use Tempus as, examples throughout this conversation. So let me know what you think about this. This is one of the first interviews we've really done. We would love to do more of these in the future. So if you're interested, reach out and let me know. All right. Enjoy the conversation. Think that Kenny is such an expert in this space. Kenny and I have worked together before, and I'm really excited to have him on this call today. Kenny is an expert in project and program management, performance, and business change, and he has more than 25 years of experience in telecommunications and IT. He specializes in delivering improvements to project performance by deploying methodical frameworks, processes, and tools across organizations, managing business change to deliver value-add improvement, and that is really at the heart of it all, which is why we're here today. Like I said, I have worked with Kenny for a number of years now. He is a former Tempus admin. He has deployed Tempus into businesses, building that value from resource management. And I have always enjoyed all of our conversations, whether it's about Tempus, about processes, or even about life. So, Kenny, so excited to have you here today.
Hi, Samantha. Thanks very much for having me today and inviting me to participate in this discussion topic. It's a topic I feel really strongly about, and I'm hoping that by sharing this, there'll be some useful takeaways for the audience, wherever they are on their resource management journey. I've really enjoyed working closely with ProSymmetry, and I'm passionate about the benefits that resource management can bring, and particularly tools like Tempus can bring to organizations, project delivery and operations. So yeah, just thanks again for inviting me to help you with this.
Of course. Like I said, no one better for the conversation today. So, Kenny, let's start from the beginning. How does an organization start to identify that they have a need for both a resource management solution and a process, beyond Excel?
So that's a good question, about how we identify that need. Mm-hmm. I think if you're doing more projects than the organization can handle, you feel like you're constantly having to prioritize resources across projects and operational day-to-day work. If you're not sure where your resources are deployed or whether they're deployed appropriately, then there's clear evidence that you need a resource management solution. Mm-hmm. You could start off small. You could start with spreadsheets. You could use something like that to explore what your requirements are on a small scale. But you're very quickly going to need a robust solution because it's just going to become too much data management, manually updating spreadsheets and integrating them together. It becomes incredibly cumbersome very, very quickly.
Yeah, we hear that all the time. I mean, I don't know if it's crazy to say, but it really is. Excel is one of our, as Tempus, a software, biggest competitors. And it really is because, everyone has Excel. Excel is malleable, but you bring up a very good point of there comes a time where managing that data that is in Excel and managing the versions of the spreadsheet, you outgrow that. And that's fine. That's natural. It's a fantastic place to start. But there comes a time where you really need something more. So completely
it has the advantage that it's free, so it's an easy place to start. But
yes,
you're really going to discover the cost once it gets really big.
That's actually a really good point. Excel is free, but it does come at a cost. That is a fantastic point. Oh my gosh. So are there any questions? Because you brought up before, are there more projects in the organization can handle? Are your resources, deployed where they should be? So yes, those are important questions, but to even understand, to introduce another software into a system or into a process or an organization, I should say, what are some of the things that are important to answer upfront?
So I think that it'd be very easy to say, oh yeah, we need a resource management solution. Let's buy a product off the shelf. But you really need to understand why it's important. What is the business problem that you are trying to solve? What will the benefits of that be versus the cost? Because there is a cost of deploying this tool, both in terms of software and the cost of the organization of delivering it. What is your current baseline of performance? So you need to understand where you're failing, why you're failing. Is resource management one of the critical factors? What KPIs do you want to achieve? And I guess most seriously, is deploying yet another tool into the organization really the right solution for you? If it fits a need that no other tool is producing, then fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm really glad that you bring up that point. I think some people see a new tool. It's almost, they're like, this is going to fix everything. And it might, it definitely might. But if there's no like, okay, but like, do we actually need this? And why is this important? I really like that you highlighted those questions to ask, just because, unfortunately, we see it where people purchase Tempus, we're doing the implementation, and it really is they haven't put that thought ahead of it. And so we're having to do that in the implementation, which is fine. Love asking questions. I love having that conversation. But it makes the timing of the deployment, that just drags things out a little bit and everything. So I'm really glad that you brought that up. Okay, so we have answered those questions. We have determined that, yes, introducing another tool into the organization is the solution here. So where would you start on that journey? We've identified the need. We have confirmed that it's a problem. How would you get that conversation underway, I should say, to maximize the chances of success in the deployment?
So that's an excellent question. And I think you're starting this journey, you need commitment from the top of the organization. I feel really strongly that this is all about delivering business change, and you have to bring people with you. That means that you've got to sell the benefits and get buy-in from them. But you still need commitment from the top, because inevitably these people are doing the work that you require around resource management. They're doing this on top of their existing accountabilities. They've already got stretched resources, as we've already identified. Mm-hmm. They don't have this in their job description or their objectives. Many of whom will groan or hold their head in their hands and, directly resist you. So there needs to be something from the top that says, we've decided that this is important to the success of our organization. Mm-hmm. It's important for you to make time for this. Mm-hmm. And then you've got that, I call it a stick, that when times get tough, you can say, well, the boss, the leadership team have said, you need to support me, even though most of your effort will be trying to bring them with you by getting value and buy-in.
Yeah. So how would you secure that leadership commitment based on that business case, based on all of the arguments that you are making for this, knowing that you need that leadership buy-in, which is something I completely agree with. The top needs to be driving the change because everyone else is actually doing the work, exactly as you just said. So let's go back to the top. How can you secure that commitment from your leadership team?
I think your leadership team are going to need evidence, and they're going to need stakeholder support to convince them that this is the right thing to do. So I think it's important that you have gone round the senior stakeholders who are actually the resource owners. They're the ones that are having problems day in, day out with the assignment of resource on BAU or operational work versus projects. So they're the ones that need to help you sell this idea. And often these will be the people that are also contributing to the decision-making of business cases. So it's really important to have them on board.
Yeah.
I think just taking that a stage further, the leadership team that actually approves the projects, they're the ones making the decisions about whether or not to support a project, yet another project. They're the ones deciding on the priorities or juggling the priorities. They're the ones that have to make the decisions about whether we're going to commit the resource to this versus that. So It's really important that you're engaged with the leadership team. Ultimately, they're the ones that will sign off your business case to deploy the solution.
Yeah.
And then I think in a mature organization, inevitably there will be a PMO function that provides governance and support and reporting. They will understand what the performance for the projects are. They'll understand what the causes of poor performance are. It's probably quite likely that they were the ones that would lead such a project to deploy this into the organization. They might put the business case. So the PMO has a very, very strong advisory role to the leadership team and the senior stakeholders to say, we think that our project performance is being impacted by resource management, and here's the data to underpin that. We strongly advise deploying a solution to address resource management.
Yeah. Yeah. I really like how you broke that up into, the stakeholders who are the resource managers, the resource owners, the people who that's their team. These are the team members who are maybe coming to them saying like, I'm supposed to be working on this, but we still have this going on. And I have all this operational work or BAU work as well, and then also I really like, yes, the PMO is very important here because resource management or the lack of 100% determines the success of their projects. I mean, that is a soapbox I will stand on for forever. There are many other things out there, of course, but like resource management, if you don't have the people, the work's not getting done. But I do want to focus on, you really mentioned like the leadership team that approves the business cases. And of course, we're talking here, the business case about introducing a resource management solution, introducing a resource management process. But I like how you're focusing on the business cases that, once this is all in place, there is an entity in the organization that approves all of the new projects coming in, and really getting the buy-in from them, because if you're just now introducing resource management, that has to be yet another factor in their decision making. And so they also need to understand how that is going to drive that decision making as well. I think that was a very, robust answer and a very honest answer of the reality of business. So thank you for that. That was awesome. So you also mentioned the data points that the PMO could bring to, the leadership team that is making the decision to pursue this. What data points do you think that PMO team should have to be able to really kind of prove out the need for this?
I think at the end of the day, we're talking about project performance. Is our project portfolio performing? I guess a number of key areas. I guess the one I would start with are, if you've got projects that are consistently delivering late against their business case target, and that inevitably delays the benefits of the project and really calls into question the business case itself, because that was a cost benefit analysis. Yeah. So if your projects are consistently delivering late, you need to look at why that is. There could be a number of reasons for that, but a very strong possibility is resourcing. And so you need the evidence to back that up. So moving on to that then. So if you're regularly seeing resourcing conflicts, it's the same teams, the same SMEs that are coming up again and again as critical resources, and projects are being delayed because that team don't have the resources to support this, or that specialist is not available. That's another example that you're taking on too many projects that are impacting individual areas adversely beyond their demand, and a solution is required to help you get a handle on that. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to pause you there for a second. Sorry to interrupt. That's one thing that, not to make this about Tempus, but to make it about Tempus for a second here. That is one thing when people get their project data, their resource data, all of these things into Tempus. I mean, you can see the impact right away, like immediately. As soon as your data is in Tempus, you're like, oh, there's a lot of decisions we need to make here, which is one of my favorite things about our software. But the resourcing conflicts, it is amazing to hear just how many organizations can't answer that question. Like, this person is a bottleneck because they really are an expert. They move quickly. Everyone enjoys working with them, or maybe it's a specific team or something like that. And you may know, especially as a resource manager or project manager, you may know that person is doing a lot, but until you can actually see it with the data, and then understand, oh, hey, well, we have people over here who are also, lovely human beings to work with. They just may not have as much experience or whatever. They could be taking on some of this work. And I'm really glad you brought that up, because I just think, understanding what those conflicts are, even if, they're unintentional, best intentions behind that's a major data point of specifically that we see with new customers, of just like, oh, wow. And I think that's just such an important data point. So apologies for interrupting. Just wanted to mention that.
No, that's okay. And I think just off the back of that, I'd just add that you'll find that teams are masking the problem.
Yeah.
So you'll find that there are particularly key specialists, and because they're trying to do their best and support their organization, that they're doing excessive hours, well beyond their contracted hours, and masking the fact that we've got a shortfall in resource. And that's just not really apparent until you've got some kind of solution in place that tells you what people are working on.
Yeah.
I think I'll just add another point as well, that we're talking about almost like reactive, like there's a business case coming up and have we got the resources to support this business case? But there's annual planning that takes place.
Yeah.
That decides what our portfolio is going to be this year, and can we cope with 50 projects or 150 projects. Long before any of those projects get underway and start preparing the business cases, you could be making decisions about these key areas need resource. That can be part of the business planning process, or actually some of these projects need to be deferred as part of the roadmap planning because we know well in advance that we don't have sufficient resource for them.
Yeah, I am so happy you brought that up, because we really were focusing on the reactive things. But and honestly, I'm going to make a generalization here. I think that a lot of people, like that's kind of like the first approach when they're thinking about resource management, when they haven't gone up those levels of maturity yet and things like that. It's just, okay, well, we need to react to what's happening now. But, putting in place a resource management solution, processes, getting all of that buy-in. Yes, like proactively, you can determine, okay, we have 50 projects for next year. We need to prioritize these, like operational work, BAU. That is going to happen regardless, right? So what are the actual priorities of the organization, whether that's an enterprise PMO or just a specific team or whatnot, and what's possible, what's feasible with who we have today, in making those decisions. Are we going to hire to be able to do more projects? Are we going to deprioritize? Are we okay with that? Is the benefit of this project here? It's a lower priority now, but it has a much bigger benefit. So we need to, increase that priority. It's just, I think resource management, it just allows you to be so much more strategic and so much more, again, intentional of just the work that's going on. And I'm so happy you brought up, being proactive, because I feel like in the stage of the maturity, we're talking very reactive, just trying to figure things out as they're happening. And then there comes a time where you're just like, no, we could avoid all of this if we just plan a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I think there are multiple layers to this, that you've got the strategic bit, as you say, and then you've got individual business cases coming through, and you've then got reacting to a problem that's come up this week. And you need to be working all of those levels together.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Nothing's ever just like simple and easy. There's a lot going on all the time. So very good point.
And there was one other thing I was just going to touch on, which is about budget. So you might find that your projects are going over budget, they're overspending, and that there are multiple causes that for that. It could be your external costs, for example, but you might find that it's because we're burning the resources for longer than we planned because the projects are in delay, or that we've had to outsource some of the work to a third party or bring contractors in, and they cost more cost than employees. So that's another indicator that you've got a problem with your resourcing.
Yeah. We had a team, specifically like a product engineering team, who had years-long projects, which is, awesome. They're using Tempus, fantastic. And they were still finding that, projects were getting delayed and these products weren't getting to the market and all of these things. And even, with a resource management solution in place, I worked with them to really understand like what was happening today and to really understand what that budgeting was. And it was when they were able to start I don't want to say enforcing, but to your point, leadership commitment and that top-down approach and everything, when they were able to start saying, hey, in order to avoid this, we need to be doing this down here. We need to be doing this at the beginning and everything. And I mean, with all of those changes in place and with really looking at it and putting the dots together between resources and project budget and project benefit and ROI, I mean, they've been able to reduce, all of the delays, not all, but most of the delays that they've been having. They've been able to, specifically say why this is happening. And I just think, you need that resource visibility. You need to understand what's happening. Very important. I'm glad you brought that up. So we have the business case. We were discussing all the different data points of just, making the argument for resource management in general. But what about business requirements? So you've decided on other tools, what you guys need. You've decided like, okay, this is the route to go. When it comes to using that software, when is it too much or when is it not enough for defining those true business requirements then?
It's a good question, and defining business requirements on projects is something I'm very passionate about, how important that is. But there definitely is a fine line between, finding a balance between being not detailed enough and too high level versus getting really properly bogged down in the detail. So I think in this example, we're talking about a new resource management solution. We probably don't know a huge amount about that solution. We may have looked at multiple solutions at a high level and seen some demos. So we'll know broadly what the capabilities are. And at that broad level, you can kind of take a punt on what your roadmap might be. Like, let's start with the minimum viable product. This is what we would deploy first of all, and some of these other features we would deploy later. That means that then on that initial deployment, and this is kind of fairly standard for projects or anyone familiar with Agile, that your next phase, you go into more detail as to what those requirements are. So I think a mix of, being at a broad level, but for your next phase, being more granular. That's where I would start on business requirements.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Again, to talk about Tempus and my experience there, managing our implementation team, managing implementations themselves, we find that some customers come to us with a very detailed business requirements, which is fine. Like, we're like, okay, we know what we're trying to achieve here. And one of the things that's really not taken into consideration is, myself and my team, we are the experts in Tempus. So we know what you need to be successful. We know all of the different nuances. We know how to pair things, that the customer is the expert in to Tempus. And to that point, it's kind of this balance of any solution where the customer is the expert, like the organization is the expert in their processes and their needs, their data, all of those things. And they are familiar, but they don't know Tempus the way that they will one day. And on the flip side, any software implementation team, we are the experts of Tempus. We are the experts of that software. And, we don't know the processes. We don't know the data. We don't know those things that the customer is the expert in. And so I think it's this definite balance. And I'm really glad you brought up, like, the business requirements in the beginning have to be broader. So that way you can be more specific in additional phases. Again, I don't mean to make this all about Tempus, but just coming from my experience here, things are going to move much quicker when teams are open to more at the beginning and to say, okay, minimum viable product is blank, blank, blank. We need to be able to see this. Perfect. Sounds good. And then eventually we want to get to, this portion of the software or be able to make these types of decisions or to be able to do this. And even if it's not software related, it is, process related or decisions to be made related, something like that. I think that that's such a key thing about, the true business requirements of a project that is implementing a new software is really coming in, being flexible, being open to ideas. You purchase software because it hit all your key things and you demoed it, you trialed it, all those lovely items. And then it really comes, okay, well, we need to be open-minded here. So that way later we can really pinpoint what we want to do. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, and as you say, the organization is the expert in their processes and procedures. and you're the expert in the software. So it's really a proper, true collaboration consultancy to figure all that out and come together. I think it would be too easy to get really bogged down in very detailed requirements, well ahead of you ever needing to deploy those requirements.
Yeah.
Which kind of leads into my next point about, don't try and eat the whole elephant in one bite.
Yes.
This needs to be rolled out iteratively. People need to become familiar, acclimatized to the new processes, the new tool, build maturity journey, you bring them with you. You need to iterate this. Don't try and take everything on day one. Figure out what you need to start with and then add iteratively when the organization's ready.
Yeah. If I could add just one thing there, I also think just about like data quality in the beginning too. So not even talking about, like, well, processes, yes, and solution, yes, but also data quality. Most organizations find that the quality of data is not great, especially when, they have this system over here and that system over here, and this is happening here, and then this is happening here. And then when you bring it all together, you're like, wait a second, that's not great. And so I also think there has to be a moment of consideration there of just like, hey, you're likely going to realize that the data isn't where you need it to be in order to do some things. And that's not a bad thing by any means. That's just a reality, like, especially for large enterprise organizations. I mean, you have how many tools out there, you have how many processes out there, how many people out there, they're doing things just a little bit differently, but as that continues on, it becomes massive differences. So I also think that's a thing too, is even just understanding like where you are with your data today and where you need to be in the future. I think that that's really important too.
Yeah, I think the data quality could take 3 to 6 months. And within a month or 2 or 3 months, you could be making some broad decisions that you've got some data that shows you there's a business problem, but you can't really get too granular with it because you've only just introduced the users and they only just started updating their data and you've been helping them correct the data. That all takes time. But then as you go on and they become more familiar with the tool and they're using more actively, it becomes more accurate. But just taking Tempus as one of the examples, the kind of where you want to be is using the what if scenario planning. Yeah. But you need the data quality to be there long before you start using that. So you wouldn't start with what if scenario planning.
Yeah. Selfishly glad you brought that up because that's what everyone wants to do day one. And I am here for it. Yes, that is perfect. Exactly. But there's also some realities that hit of just like, we could do this, but it's not going to be what you think it is just because of the data. Like we really need to refine that first. You can make decisions based on anything, but if it's not, it's not an educated decision, let's say, it may not be the best for the team. So I'm really glad you brought that up. We see that all the time. So you mentioned rolling it out iteratively and the solution specifically. So where do you start with that? Like where, not talking about Tempus specifically, but just overall, how do you start with thinking about that?
Another good question. And I kind of favor starting in the areas where I have control, like, for example, in our function where we've had that leadership commitment from the top and we've got that mandate, we've got the stick that we can beat the teams with if required to get them to do things the way that we want. So, you need to be really clear about who are you rolling this out to, what teams, what stakeholders, what are the priorities. And just as an example, some teams are very heavily, involved in projects, and it's a really high priority that we get them into this resource management solution using it actively as early as possible. Whereas some teams are very much just business as usual with some small interactions on projects, and you don't need to be beating them over the head every week to update Tempus. They can be meeting the minimum requirements. So, be really clear about who you're rolling out to. I would start with the function that has made the decision from the top that signed off your business case. Yeah. And then once you get underway and you've proven the solution, then other functions will follow. Hopefully you'll get buy-in to roll it out more expansively, because by that point you will have demonstrated that you're generating value add from this.
Yeah. Yeah. That is a very good point too. I think, again, to the whole point about not eating the elephant in one bite, really just saying, okay, we can have the biggest impact here because we do have the most control or have the most influence, whatever that is. And, demonstrating that value. That is such a key point here of, people don't want to add another tool. They don't want to add another process. So what are they going to get out of it? And I think that's a very good point of, there has to be some people or some team that is leading the charge of doing it first, being introduced to it first. But we need to be able to then show, okay, well, here's everything that they did. Like, here's everything they did with it. And here's what you can get. Yes, I completely agree.
And, next I'd say that really, and it plays what we said earlier. So roll out the minimum viable product. So we need to get all of the teams into the tool, with all the line structure, and we need to get all the projects into the tool, and we need to start mapping out what the assignments of those people are, including the other operational BAU work. So that's your kind of minimum viable product. Get that in first. And that will give you fairly rapidly some real insights into what people are working on and, where the business problems are. But then I think we've discussed a number of times, we needed to experiment with the tool a little bit, a bit of trial and error. So, and also some teams will be more advanced than others, and they'll be kind of the early advocates, leading adopters. So they're the ones that will come and say, oh, can the tool do this? We love it, but we want to do these extra bits.
Yeah.
So very much after you've done your minimum viable product and people are starting to take it up, then you're really looking at, well, what are the features that we need next, but also what is the demand from our stakeholders now that they're using the tool?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really good point too, of just, what's next? Like, thinking about that in terms of, I love the idea of users really driving that, of being like, hey, this is great. Can we do this too? Can we do that too? Is it possible to view this? And I think when you're getting those questions specifically from those early adopters, those first groups, you're doing something right. You're doing something right. You're on the right path there. It's a very validating feeling. And that, like you said, that really can drive a lot of, we can, let's go over here now. So that's a very good point of just that, rolling that out in different steps, different phases.
But also there's a competency thing you need to take people on that journey as well. So in the beginning, what is Tempus? And here's some training. And then, how do I log in? How do I get my teams in? How do I set up my reports? So you're gradually moving them up the competency ladder. How do I start analyzing my resources? You might then, even up to that point, you might not even touch resource requests. That's too complicated. So then suddenly you have to tell them, oh, by the way, you've got all these resource requests and you need to be reviewing them and improving them. And well, how do I do that? And I don't want to decline this. I want to split it. How do I do that? So as they move up, you can gradually release more training that allows them to do more advanced things in the tool. As it becomes more intuitive for them to do the basics. Yeah.
That is a very good point of, it's just, again, we keep going back to, you have to introduce kind of the minimum viable product. You have to make sure that people are understanding the end goal. I think that's a very, dare I say it again, you just have to be very intentional with it, very intentional in order to see success. And that doesn't mean you have to spend potentially you do have to spend a lot of time, with Tempus, as the example's going, or with the teams, but that's going to lead to so much more time given back in the future, when this is a well-oiled machine. Yeah, completely agree.
Yeah, the time's a big factor. I think we're going to talk about comms later more thoroughly. But I think that for me, one of the real strengths was the users that were really adopting. So inevitably there's push and pull. I'm sorry, but you have to log into this tool. You have to help me figure out whether we can support this business case. You have to meet the minimum requirement. but it's so rewarding when teams are coming to me saying, we love this tool, but can it do these more advanced things? Could you configure it to do this for us or that for us? And then I'm selling those stories to the other teams. So I'm speaking to other teams and they're saying, oh, we've got this problem. Oh, actually, another team have solved that with them. So the early adopters are just awesome to have on your side.
Yeah, I agree. I always recommend people have that. Like, who's the first people that we can get in here that, recognize the need it the most? Like, who can we get in here early on so that way we get some quick wins? Yeah.